The dust kicked up around Lucia Zimmerman's boots as she rode through the gates of the Double Bar G Ranch in Las Lunas, New Mexico. Her jaw set with determination that had carried her 300 miles from Texas. She had exactly $12 to her name, a borrowed horse she would need to return, and the kind of desperation that made women do things society said they should not. But in August of 1878, desperation was something Lucia understood better than most. The ranch sprawled across the valley like a small kingdom, with corrals branching out in every direction and a main house that sat proud against the Manzano Mountains. Cattle dotted the landscape as far as she could see, their lowing carrying on the hot wind that never seemed to stop in this part of the territory. Lucia had heard about this place from a drifter passing through San Antonio, how Dalton Garrett ran the biggest operation in central New Mexico, and how he was always looking for good hands. The drifter had laughed when Lucia asked if Garrett hired women. That laugh still burned in her chest. She found the ranch owner near the largest corral, watching two of his men try to break a paint horse that clearly had other ideas about the arrangement. Dalton Garrett stood a head taller than most men, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore his authority like he wore his hat, natural and unquestioned, and when he turned those sharp gray eyes on Lucia, she felt the full weight of his assessment. "Help you, miss." His voice carried the rough edges of a man who spent more time talking to horses than people. Lucia dismounted, keeping her spine straight despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. "I am here about work. I can ride, rope, and brand as well as any man you have got on this ranch. I need a job." One of the ranch hands snorted from his position on the corral fence. Dalton held up a hand, silencing the man without even looking at him. His gaze never left Lucia's face. "That's so. You have worked cattle before." "My father ran a small operation outside San Antonio. I worked it from the time I could sit a horse until he died last year. Bank took the land, but they could not take what I learned." The words came out harder than she intended, but Lucia was past the point of soft speeches. She needed this job, needed it like she needed air. "Sorry about your father." Dalton's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been sympathy crossing his features. "But ranch work is hard, dangerous. I have got 12 men working this spread, and every one of them earned their place. Then let me earn mine." Lucia stepped closer, close enough to see the surprise in his eyes at her boldness. "Give me 1 week. If I cannot do the work, I will leave and you will owe me nothing. If I can do it, I want the same pay as every hand on this ranch." The ranch hand on the fence laughed outright this time. "Boss, you cannot be considering this. A woman working cattle. She will get herself killed or get one of us killed trying to protect her." Dalton's jaw tightened, but he kept his attention on Lucia. She could see him thinking, weighing possibilities, and she held her breath without meaning to. She had nowhere else to go. This was her last chance, her final throw of the dice before she would have to consider options that made her stomach turn. "All right." The word fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock through the assembled men. 1 week. You bunk in the spare room off the kitchen, not in the bunkhouse. Mrs. Chen, my cook, will make sure you are settled. Tomorrow morning you work alongside my men and I will see what you can do. Thank you." Lucia extended her hand the way her father had taught her, firm and direct. Dalton took it, his grip strong but not crushing, and something passed between them in that moment, some current of understanding or challenge or possibility that Lucia could not quite name. "Do not thank me yet." Dalton released her hand, but his eyes held hers for a heartbeat longer. "Tomorrow might change your mind about wanting this job." He was wrong about that. Lucia had known hard work her entire life, had known the burn of muscles pushed past their limit, and the special kind of exhaustion that came from a day in the saddle under the New Mexico sun. What she was not prepared for was how closely Dalton Garrett watched everything that happened on his ranch, and how often that meant he was watching her. The first day, he set her to work mending fence line on the eastern pasture alongside a grizzled hand named Pete, who clearly thought the whole enterprise was foolishness. Lucia worked without stopping, her hands raw and bleeding by midday, but she refused to slow down. When Pete grudgingly admitted she could handle a post-hole digger better than the last 2 men Dalton had hired, Lucia felt a fierce satisfaction that carried her through the afternoon. Dalton rode out to check their progress just before sunset. He dismounted and walked the fence line they had repaired, testing each post with his weight, and Lucia found herself holding her breath again, waiting for his verdict. "Good work." He turned to Pete. "How did she do?" Pete spat tobacco juice into the dirt, his weathered face thoughtful. "She did not quit, did not complain, kept up just fine." He paused, then added, "Better than fine, truth be told. Girl knows her way around a fence line." Lucia's exhausted body felt suddenly lighter. 1 day down, 6 to go. The second day brought harder tests. Dalton sent her out with the crew working the western range, moving a herd of 200 head to fresh grazing. The work required constant vigilance, quick reactions, and the kind of horsemanship that could not be faked. Lucia had grown up doing exactly this kind of work, and her body remembered even when her tired muscles protested. She noticed Dalton watching from a ridge around mid-morning, the sun behind him turning him into a dark silhouette against the bright sky. He stayed there for nearly an hour, and Lucia felt his gaze on her like a physical touch. She tried not to think about what he saw, tried to focus on the work, on keeping the cattle moving, on proving she belonged here. By the third day, the other hands had stopped making jokes. They still did not talk to her much, but they stopped talking about her like she was not there. Progress, Lucia thought, even if it was small. The fourth day, everything changed. They were working close to the ranch house, sorting calves from their mothers for branding. It was chaos and noise, dust and constant motion. And Lucia was in the thick of it when one of the bulls decided he had had enough of human interference. The massive animal broke from the herd with a bellow that raised the hair on Lucia's neck, charging straight toward where one of the younger hands had been thrown from his horse. Lucia reacted on instinct, spurring her mount forward and waving her hat to divert the bull's attention. The animal turned toward her instead, and suddenly she was the one in danger, her horse dancing nervously as the bull charged. She held her ground, waiting, then wheeled her horse aside at the last possible second. The bull thundered past, and 2 other hands managed to rope it before it could turn for another charge. When the dust settled and the bull was secured, Lucia found Dalton standing next to her horse, his face pale beneath his tan. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I have seen in a long time." His voice shook slightly, betraying emotion he was trying to contain. "You could have been killed. So could Tommy." Lucia nodded toward the young hand who was being helped to his feet. "I did what needed doing." Dalton's hand came up to grip her stirrup, and Lucia looked down to find his eyes blazing with something that was not quite anger and not quite fear. "You did, but that does not mean I have to like watching it." The air between them felt suddenly charged, heavy with words neither of them was saying. Lucia's heart hammered in her chest, and she was abruptly aware of how his hand had moved from her stirrup to rest against her leg, how his gaze held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Boss." One of the hands called out, breaking the moment. "We got 3 more need sorting." Dalton stepped back, his hand falling away, but his eyes stayed on Lucia's face. "We will talk later." It was not a request. That evening, after the hands had been fed, and the sun had painted the mountains gold and purple, Lucia found Dalton waiting for her near the horse barn. He stood with one boot propped on the lower rail of the fence, his hat pushed back, and when he saw her approaching, something in his expression made her steps slow. "You have proved your point." He said it without preamble, his voice rough. "You can do the work. Better than most of the men I have got. Your week is not up yet, but I have seen enough." Lucia's stomach dropped. This was it, then. He was going to send her away after all, and she would have to figure out where to go with even less money than she had arrived with. "I see." "I do not think you do." Dalton pushed off the fence and closed the distance between them. "I want you to stay, permanently, and I will pay you the same as every other hand on this ranch." Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. "Thank you. I will not let you down." "I am not finished." He stopped close enough that she could see gold flecks in his gray eyes. "The thing is, Lucia, that is not fair either." Confusion replaced relief. "What do you mean?" "I mean you are worth more." Dalton's voice dropped lower, intimate in the gathering darkness. "You work harder, smarter, and with more skill than half my crew. You saved Tommy's life today without hesitation. If I am paying you the same as them, I am cheating you." Lucia stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You want to pay me more. I want to pay you what you are worth." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Which is more than most of the men I have working here. If that sits wrong with you, you can take it up with management." A laugh bubbled up in Lucia's chest, unexpected and bright. "You are management? Then I guess you are stuck with my decision." His smile faded into something more serious, more searching. "Unless you have got objections to working here long term, to staying." The question held layers Lucia was not quite ready to examine. She could feel something building between them, something that had started the moment their hands first touched and had grown stronger every day since. Working for Dalton would mean seeing him every day, would mean more moments like this one where the air felt too thick to breathe and her heart beat too fast for comfort. No objections. Her voice came out softer than she intended. "I would like to stay." "Good." Dalton held her gaze for a long moment, and Lucia could see him wrestling with something, some decision he was trying to make. Finally, he cleared his throat and stepped back, breaking the spell. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we are moving the herd to the northern pasture. Long day ahead." Lucia nodded and turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Lucia," she looked back over her shoulder, "I am glad you rode through my gates." The words were simple, but the way he said them, the weight they carried, made Lucia's breath catch. "So am I." The next weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Lucia worked harder than she ever had in her life, and for the first time since her father died, she felt like she had a purpose again. The men accepted her presence, some grudgingly and some with genuine respect, and she began to understand the rhythms of the double-bar G, the way the ranch breathed and moved like a living thing. And through it all, there was Dalton. He showed up wherever she was working, always with some excuse about checking on progress or evaluating stock, but Lucia noticed he spent more time watching her than watching anything else. They began to talk, short conversations at first about work and weather, but gradually deepening into something more substantial. She learned he had built this ranch from nothing after the war, that he had come west with 2 horses and a dream, and turned them into an empire through sheer stubbornness and skill. He learned about her childhood, about her father's death, about the bank agent who had looked at her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person with rights. "I would like to buy back that land someday," Lucia admitted one evening when they were riding back from checking water levels in the stock tanks. "I know it is probably foolish, but it was my father's dream. I hate that it died with him." Dalton was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon where the sun was setting in shades of orange and red. It is not foolish. Dreams are what keep us going out here. Without them, we are just surviving, not living. "Do you have dreams?" Lucia asked, then immediately felt presumptuous. "I am sorry, that is too personal." "No." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her heart stutter. "I do not mind you asking personal questions, Lucia. I have got dreams. They have been changing lately, though, shifting into something I did not expect." The weight of his gaze, the meaning threading through his words, made Lucia's mouth go dry. She knew what he was saying without saying it, could feel the truth of her own shifting feelings reflected back at her. Somewhere in the long days and honest work, somewhere in the conversations and stolen glances, she had started to care for Dalton Garrett in a way that went far beyond employer and employee. "I understand about unexpected things." She kept her voice steady with effort. "Life has a way of taking us places we did not plan to go. Sometimes those places are better than what we planned." Dalton's horse had drifted closer to hers, close enough that their legs nearly touched. "Sometimes they are exactly what we needed, even if we did not know we needed them." Lucia's breath caught. They were still talking about dreams, but they were not talking about dreams at all anymore. And sometimes they are frightening because they matter too much. Yes, the single word held a world of understanding. That too. They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable quiet. It was the silence of two people who had said just enough, who understood each other too well for more words to be necessary. The next day brought trouble in the form of a rider from the neighboring ranch. Lucia was working near the barn when she heard raised voices and emerged to find Dalton in heated discussion with a man she did not recognize. The stranger was built like a bull, all muscle and aggression, and his face had gone red with anger. "I am telling you, Garrett, those are my cattle." The man jabbed a finger toward the eastern pasture. "I counted 40 head with my brand, and I want them back now. And I am telling you, Marcus, that every head of cattle on my land belongs to me." Dalton's voice had gone cold and hard. "If you have got proof otherwise, bring it to the territorial marshal. Otherwise, get off my property." Marcus Thornton, Lucia learned later, owned the struggling ranch to the east and had a reputation for trying to expand his holdings through intimidation and accusation. He also had a reputation for violence, which is why Lucia's hand drifted toward the rifle she had started carrying after one of the hands warned her about rattlesnakes. "You calling me a liar?" Marcus's hand dropped to his gun belt, and Lucia saw Dalton's posture shift, ready for trouble. "I am calling you mistaken." Dalton kept his voice level. "Now leave before this gets ugly." "It is already ugly, Garrett. You think you can build this empire and push the rest of us out, but some of us are not going to roll over." Marcus's eyes drifted past Dalton and landed on Lucia. "That your new hand I heard about. The woman. Desperate times indeed." Anger flared hot in Lucia's chest, but Dalton spoke before she could. "Miss Zimmerman is worth 10 of you on your best day, Thornton. Now I have asked you nicely to leave. I will not ask again." Marcus spat in the dirt, but he must have seen something in Dalton's eyes that convinced him not to push further. He swung back into his saddle with a curse. "This is not over. It never started." Dalton watched until Marcus rode off the property, then turned to find Lucia had moved to stand beside him, rifle held loosely but ready. Something flashed in his eyes, appreciation and concern warring for dominance. "You should not have come out here. You needed backup." Lucia lowered the rifle but did not move away. "Besides, I have a stake in this ranch too now. What threatens it threatens me." Dalton's expression softened, and he reached out as if to touch her face before catching himself and dropping his hand. "Marcus is dangerous." If he comes back, I need you to promise me you will stay safe. Only if you promise the same thing." Lucia met his eyes steadily. "You do not get to put yourself at risk and expect me to hide." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You are stubborn, you know that. I learned from the best." She smiled back, and the tension between them shifted into something warmer, something that made her want to step closer instead of pulling away. They might have stayed like that, caught in the gravity of each other, if Pete had not called out that the fence crew was ready to head out. Dalton blinked, the spell breaking, and nodded. "Go on. I will deal with Marcus if he makes trouble." But Marcus did make trouble, just not the way anyone expected. 3 days later, Lucia was riding the northern boundary when she spotted smoke rising from a stand of cottonwoods near the creek. Range fire was every rancher's nightmare, and she kicked her horse into a gallop without thinking, racing toward the smoke to assess the threat. What she found was not a wildfire, but something almost worse. Someone had deliberately set fire to a section of fence, and the flames were spreading toward the dry grass. Lucia did not hesitate. She stripped off her jacket and began beating at the flames, fighting to contain them before they could rage out of control. She did not know how long she fought the fire, only that her arms burned and her lungs ached from smoke when she finally heard hoofbeats approaching. Dalton appeared with 4 of his men, all of them carrying water and blankets, and together they managed to kill the fire before it could spread beyond the fence line. When it was over, Lucia collapsed onto the ground, coughing and exhausted. Dalton dropped beside her, his face black with soot and tight with anger. This was deliberately set. He stared at the charred fence posts, his hands clenched into fists. "Marcus is trying to burn me out. Can you prove it?" Lucia's voice came out rough from smoke. "No, but I know." Dalton turned to look at her, and his expression shifted from anger to something closer to fear. "You could have been killed if this had spread, if you had been caught in it. But I was not." Lucia reached out and gripped his hand, needing to ground both of them. "I am fine. The fire is out." "We stopped it. You stopped it." His fingers tightened around hers. "You saved part of my ranch, maybe all of it if that fire had spread. You keep saving things, Lucia, saving people. It is what you do for things that matter." The words were out before she could think better of them, honest and raw. "For people who matter." Dalton's eyes searched her face, and Lucia could see the question forming, could see him gathering courage to ask it. But Pete called out that they should get back to the ranch house, that the marshal should be notified, and the moment slipped away like water through fingers. That night, after giving his statement to the territorial marshal and posting extra men on watch, Dalton came to find Lucia where she sat on the porch of the main house, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Mind if I sit?" He did not wait for an answer, just settled onto the step beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Your ranch." Lucia kept her eyes on the stars, not trusting herself to look at him. "You can sit where you like. Maybe." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "The marshal thinks he can prove Marcus was behind the fire. Seems our neighbor has been bragging in town about how I will be ruined by autumn. Will you be?" Lucia finally turned to look at him, worried. "Not unless he manages to burn down everything I own and scatter my cattle to 4 territories." Dalton's smile was grim. "I have been building this place for 12 years, Lucia. I did not do it by being easy to destroy." "Good." She let out a breath she did not know she was holding. "I would hate to have signed on with a ranch that was going under." "Is that the only reason?" His voice had gone soft, intimate in the darkness. "Because you signed on with the ranch?" Lucia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment, the question she had been both hoping for and dreading. "No, that is not the only reason. Lucia." Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond. She nodded, not trusting her voice. When you rode through my gates, I thought you were foolish. Brave, but foolish. No woman had ever asked me for ranch work before, and I did not think you would last a day. He paused, gathering his words. I have never been more wrong about anything in my life. Dalton, please. He held up a hand. Let me finish. You have proven yourself 10 times over. You are the best hand I have got, and you have earned every cent I pay you and more. But somewhere in the proving, something else happened. I started looking forward to seeing you every morning. Started finding excuses to ride out wherever you were working. Started lying awake at night thinking about your smile, your courage, the way you sit a horse like you were born to it. Lucia's breath caught, her entire body frozen in place. I know it is not proper, me being your employer. I know there are 100 reasons why I should not be saying this. But when I saw that fire today, when I thought for even a moment that something might have happened to you. He turned to face her fully, and his eyes were bright with emotion. I cannot keep pretending what I feel is just respect for a good worker. It is more than that. You are more than that, to me. The words hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest, and Lucia felt tears prick her eyes. You are not the only one who stopped pretending. Her voice shook. I told myself I came here just for the work, just for the money. But that stopped being true somewhere around the 2nd week, maybe sooner. Every time you look at me, I feel like I can breathe better. Every time you smile, I want to find ways to make you smile again. And when I saw Marcus threaten you, all I could think was that I would do anything to keep you safe. Lucia. Her name was a whisper now, reverent. Can I kiss you? I have been wanting to for weeks, and if I do not do it now, I might lose my nerve. Instead of answering, Lucia closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but it deepened quickly into something urgent and real. Dalton's hand came up to cup her face, and Lucia felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, like everything she had been holding back was finally free. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right. Court you properly, not just steal kisses in the dark. We live on the same ranch. Lucia laughed, the sound bright with joy. I think we are past proper courting. Then we will do it improperly. He kissed her again, quick and sweet. I will take you to dinner in town, bring you flowers. Write you terrible poetry if that is what it takes. Please do not write poetry. Lucia grinned against his mouth. I have seen your ledgers. Your spelling is atrocious, he laughed, pulling her closer. Insult my spelling after I just declared my feelings. You are a cruel woman, Lucia Zimmerman. You like that about me. I love that about you. The words were simple, honest, and they stole Lucia's breath all over again. I love your courage and your strength and your stubborn refusal to give up on anything. I love how you look first thing in the morning covered in dust, and I love how you stand up to men twice your size without flinching. I love you, and I do not care if it is too soon to say it. It is the truth. Tears spilled down Lucia's cheeks, and she found herself laughing and crying at the same time. I love you too. I did not want to. I tried to convince myself it was just gratitude or respect, but it is more, so much more. They sat together on the porch steps, wrapped in each other's arms, and talked until the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew cold. They talked about everything and nothing, about dreams and fears, and the future they might build together. And when Dalton finally walked Lucia to her door near the kitchen, he kissed her one more time with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Tomorrow, I am taking you to town. He traced her cheekbone with his thumb. We are going to have dinner at the hotel, and I am going to introduce you as the woman I intend to marry if she will have me. Lucia's eyes widened. Dalton, that is very fast, I know, and I am not asking you to decide tonight. His smile was crooked, self-deprecating. "I am just telling you my intentions. Fair warning and all that." "Fair warning noted." Lucia kissed him once more, soft and sweet. "Now go to bed before I forget about propriety entirely." He groaned but stepped back, his eyes dark with promise. "You are going to be the death of me, woman." "I certainly hope not. I have plans for you that require you to be very much alive." His laughter followed her inside, and Lucia fell asleep with a smile on her face for the first time in longer than she could remember. The next day dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the trip to town. Lucia dressed in her best clothes, which were not particularly fancy but at least clean and only slightly worn, and met Dalton by the wagon. He looked different in his town clothes, more polished but somehow less himself, and Lucia found herself missing his usual work-worn appearance. "You look beautiful." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand lingering on hers. "But then, you always do." Flatterer. But Lucia felt herself blush anyway, pleased by the compliment. The ride to Las Lunas took about an hour, and they spent it talking about ranch business and carefully not talking about the future, as if both of them were afraid to push too hard too fast. But the silence between words was comfortable, filled with the easy understanding of two people who had found something rare and precious. The town was small but growing, with a main street lined with businesses that catered to the ranches scattered throughout the valley. Dalton guided the wagon to the hotel, one of the nicer buildings in town, and helped Lucia down with the kind of gentlemanly courtesy that made her feel cherished. They were halfway to the hotel entrance when a woman's voice called out, "Dalton Garrett, I heard you were in town." Dalton tensed beside Lucia, and she turned to see a beautiful woman approaching, dressed in the kind of expensive clothes that spoke of money and status. The woman's eyes were cold despite her smile, and when her gaze landed on Lucia, they grew even colder. "Catherine." Dalton's voice was carefully neutral. "I did not expect to see you here. I am visiting family." Catherine's smile never wavered, but her eyes stayed sharp and assessing. "You look well. Ranch life clearly agrees with you." "It does." Dalton's hand found the small of Lucia's back, a gesture of support and claim both. "Catherine Hallbrook, this is Lucia Zimmerman. She works at the Double Bar G." "How progressive." Catherine's tone made it clear what she thought of that arrangement. "I had not realized you were hiring women for ranch work, Dalton. Times must be difficult." Lucia felt her temper flare but forced herself to stay calm. This woman clearly had some history with Dalton, and rising to her bait would accomplish nothing. "Times are excellent." Dalton's voice had gone cool. "Lucia is the best hand I have got. I am lucky she agreed to work for me, I am sure." Catherine's eyes moved between them, and something like understanding crossed her face. "Oh, I see. Well, that is certainly unexpected. I think we should go." Lucia spoke quietly, not wanting to cause a scene but also not willing to stand there and be insulted. "Yes." Dalton agreed immediately. "Catherine, if you will excuse us." They made it 3 steps before Catherine's voice followed them. "Do be careful, Dalton. I would hate to see you make a mistake that would damage everything you have built." Dalton stopped, his entire body going rigid. He turned slowly, and Lucia had never seen his face so hard, so utterly closed off. "The only mistake I ever made involving you was not seeing through your games sooner. Lucia is not a mistake. She is the best thing that has happened to me in years. Now, if you will excuse us, we have dinner plans." He guided Lucia into the hotel without waiting for a response, and it was not until they were seated in the dining room that he finally let out a long breath. "I am sorry about that." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Catherine and I were engaged once, years ago. She broke it off when she realized ranching meant actual work and not just attending social events in Santa Fe." She still has feelings for you." Lucia kept her voice gentle, but she needed to know. "Did you still have feelings for her?" "No." The word was immediate and certain. "What I felt for Catherine, if I ever really felt anything beyond thinking I should want to marry her, died the day she told me she could never live on a ranch. I built my life here, Lucia. My heart is in this land, in this work. I need someone who understands that, who shares it. Someone like me." It was not a question. "Exactly like you." He squeezed her hand. "Catherine thinks she insulted you back there, but all she did was remind me how right this is. You and me. This." Lucia felt warmth spread through her chest. "I am not afraid of her, you know, or of anyone who thinks I should not be doing what I am doing. I know. It is one of the things I love about you." Dalton's smile was pure affection. "You do not back down, not for anyone." They ate dinner slowly, savoring both the food and each other's company, and afterward, Dalton took her to the general store and bought her a new hat, despite her protests that she did not need one. The storekeeper clearly recognized Dalton and treated Lucia with respect, which felt like a victory in itself. On the ride back to the ranch, with the sun setting behind them and the new hat on her lap, Lucia felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or the beginning of it. The sense that she had found not just a job but a home, not just an employer but a partner. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton glanced at her, his expression soft in the golden light. "That I am happy." Lucia leaned her head on his shoulder. "I did not think I would ever feel this way again after my father died. But I do. I am happy." His arm came around her, pulling her close. "Good, because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when they arrived back at the ranch, Dalton walked Lucia to her door again. This time when he kissed her, it was with the confidence of a man who knew his feelings were returned, who could let himself be vulnerable because he trusted the woman in his arms. "I meant what I said earlier." He spoke against her lips, his voice low and rough. "About my intentions. I want to marry you, Lucia. I want to build a life with you, a real partnership where we work this ranch together. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my days and go to sleep knowing you are safe and loved. I want everything with you." Lucia's heart felt too big for her chest. "I want that too, all of it. Then marry me." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Not next week or next month when you are ready, but say yes so I know you are mine." "Yes." The word came easily, naturally, like it had been waiting to be spoken. "Yes, Dalton, I will marry you." His kiss was celebration and promise and joy all wrapped together, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "I do not have a ring yet." Dalton looked almost embarrassed. "I should have planned this better. I do not need a ring." Lucia touched his face, loving the rough feel of stubble beneath her fingers. "I just need you. You have me, completely." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips again. "Tomorrow I am going to tell everyone on this ranch that we are getting married. And then I am going to work twice as hard to make sure the double bar G is everything you deserve. It already is." Lucia smiled up at him. "Because you are here." The next weeks passed in a blur of work and wedding planning. Dalton announced their engagement to the ranch hands over breakfast, and while some of them looked surprised, most just nodded like they had seen it coming all along. Pete actually smiled, which Lucia had not known he was capable of doing. The territorial marshal came through with evidence that Marcus Thornton had indeed been behind the fire, along with several other acts of sabotage against neighboring ranches. Marcus was arrested and his ranch put up for sale to pay damages, which meant one less threat to worry about. Lucia and Dalton fell into an easy partnership, working the ranch together during the day and spending their evenings planning their future. They decided on a small wedding in town, just close friends and the ranch hands who had become family. Lucia wrote to some of her father's old friends in Texas, wanting someone from her past to witness her future. 3 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived that changed everything. Lucia found it waiting for her after a long day of working cattle, the envelope addressed in handwriting she did not recognize. Inside was a letter from a lawyer in San Antonio, informing her that the bank that had foreclosed on her father's ranch had been found guilty of fraud and illegal foreclosure practices. All properties were being returned to their original owners, and Lucia had 60 days to claim her father's land. She read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Her father's ranch, the land she had thought lost forever, was hers again. She could go back to Texas. She could rebuild what had been taken from her. Dalton found her sitting on the porch steps, the letter clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her face. "What happened? What is wrong?" He dropped beside her, his face creased with worry. Wordlessly, Lucia handed him the letter and watched as he read it. His expression shifted from concern to understanding to something more complicated she could not quite read. "This is incredible." He lowered the letter, his voice careful. "Your father's land, everything you have been working for, I know." Lucia wiped at her tears, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in her chest. "I did not think this was possible. I thought it was gone forever. But it is not." Dalton set the letter aside and took both her hands in his. "It is yours again. You can go home." The word hit Lucia like a physical blow. Home. For so long, that had meant her father's ranch in Texas. But sitting here with Dalton's hands warm around hers, looking out at the land she had come to know and love, Lucia realized something fundamental had shifted. This is home now. The words came out quiet but certain. "The Double Bar G, New Mexico, this is where I belong." Dalton's eyes searched hers, and she could see him trying to make sure she meant it, that she was not just saying what she thought he wanted to hear. "Lucia, that ranch was your father's dream." "Your dream, I cannot ask you to give that up for me." "You are not asking, I am choosing." Lucia squeezed his hands. "I loved my father's ranch. It will always be special to me. But it was his dream, not mine. My dream is here, building something with you. Making the Double Bar G even better than it already is. Spending my life with the man I love." She paused, then added, "I could sell the Texas property, use the money to expand our operation here, make this ranch everything it could be, together. Our operation." Dalton repeated the words like they were precious. "You mean that? You want to be partners in every sense of the word, equal partners." Lucia smiled through her tears. "You pay me more than the other hands, remember? I think that means I deserve a stake in this place." His laugh was shaky with relief and emotion. "You deserve everything, the whole ranch, my whole heart, everything I have got." "I will settle for half the ranch and all your heart." Lucia kissed him softly. "That feels like a fair deal, more than fair." He pulled her close, holding her like she was something infinitely valuable. "I love you. I love that you would give up your father's land for this, for us. But I also want to make sure you do not regret it someday." "I will not." Lucia spoke with absolute certainty. "My father would want me to be happy, and I am happy here. With you, this is where I am meant to be." They sat together as the sun set, making plans for the future. They would travel to Texas after the wedding, settle the legal matters, and arrange to sell the property to someone who would care for it properly. The money would go into expanding the Double Bar G, buying more land, better stock, building the kind of operation that could support not just a ranch but a family. The wedding took place on a bright October morning, with the cottonwoods turning gold and the air crisp with the promise of winter. Lucia wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, and Dalton wore his best suit with a bolo tie that had belonged to his father. They stood before the traveling minister who served the scattered communities in the territory, surrounded by the people who had become their family and promised to love each other for the rest of their lives. When Dalton kissed her as his wife, Lucia felt like her heart might burst with joy. This man, this life, this future spreading out before them bright with possibility. It was more than she had dreamed of when she rode through the ranch gates all those months ago, desperate and determined and alone. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed everyone twice over. The hands took turns making increasingly embarrassing toasts, and Pete actually got misty-eyed when he spoke about how Lucia had proven him wrong about what women could do. As the sun began to set and the party showed no signs of slowing, Dalton pulled Lucia aside to the place where they had first kissed. Happy, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. Incredibly. Lucia leaned into him, savoring the solid warmth of his body. This has been the best day of my life. It is just the beginning. Dalton's smile was pure contentment. We have got a whole lifetime of best days ahead of us. Big promises, Mr. Garrett. I am a big promise kind of man, Mrs. Garrett. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, until Lucia forgot about the party and the people and everything except the feeling of being loved completely. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Dalton whispered against her lips, "Ready to scandalize our guests by disappearing to the house." "Absolutely." Lucia took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Lead the way, husband." They slipped away from the party, leaving their guests to celebrate without them, and spent their wedding night in the house that was now truly theirs, shared and equal. And if Lucia had any lingering doubts about choosing this life over her father's ranch in Texas, they disappeared entirely in the warmth of Dalton's arms and the certainty of his love. The winter passed in a blur of hard work and new routines. True to their agreement, Lucia and Dalton traveled to Texas in early November to settle the legal matters surrounding her father's ranch. Standing on the land where she had grown up, Lucia felt a bittersweet pang of nostalgia, but it was overshadowed by eagerness to get back to New Mexico, back to the double-bar G, back to the life she was building with her husband. They sold the property to a young family who reminded Lucia of her father in his early days, full of dreams and determination. The money was more than she had expected, enough to buy significant new holdings adjacent to the double-bar G and still have plenty left for improvements and expansion. By spring, they had doubled the size of their ranch and increased their herd substantially. Lucia threw herself into the work with the same intensity she had shown from the beginning, but now she did it as owner rather than employee, partner rather than hired hand. The other ranchers in the area slowly began to accept her presence at the stockyard auctions and business meetings, though some never quite got over their shock at seeing a woman in those spaces. Dalton loved introducing her as his wife and business partner, his pride evident in every word. And when people questioned their arrangement, questioned whether a woman should have such authority, he simply pointed to their expanding operation and asked if their results spoke for themselves. In June, Lucia realized she had missed her monthly courses twice in a row. Mrs. Chen, with the knowing eyes of a woman who had raised 6 children of her own, asked pointed questions that made Lucia blush and then laugh with joy. She told Dalton that evening while they were checking on a mare about to foal. He had been focused on the horse, worried about complications, when Lucia said quietly, "I think we are going to need to hire more help come next spring." "Why is that?" Dalton glanced at her, distracted. "Are you planning to expand again, in a manner of speaking?" Lucia smiled, her hand drifting to her still flat stomach. I am going to be expanding quite a bit, actually. Around February, if my calculations are correct." It took him a moment to understand, and then his face went through a series of expressions so rapidly, Lucia almost laughed. Shock, confusion, understanding, and finally pure joy. "You are pregnant." His voice cracked on the last word. "Yes." Lucia felt tears prick her eyes at the wonder in his face. "We are going to have a baby." Dalton crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around before setting her down gently, suddenly worried about being too rough. "A baby. We are having a baby. I am going to be a father. You are going to be an excellent father." Lucia touched his face, loving the way his eyes had gone bright with unshed tears. "Our child is so lucky. Our child." He repeated the words like they were sacred. "Lucia, I cannot believe this. I mean, I can believe it, but it is still incredible, amazing, terrifying." She laughed. "Yes to all of those things, but mostly amazing." They stood together in the barn, wrapped in each other's arms, planning a future that suddenly felt even bigger and brighter than before. Dalton immediately wanted to restrict Lucia's work, worried about her safety, but she refused to be coddled. "Women have been having babies and working ranches since ranches existed." She pointed out practically. "I will be sensible. I will not take unnecessary risks, but I am not going to sit in the house for 7 months doing nothing." They compromised. Lucia continued working but avoided the most dangerous tasks, and Dalton found himself constantly checking on her, bringing her water and making sure she rested enough. It would have been suffocating if it had not been so obviously motivated by love. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into autumn. As Lucia's belly swelled and her body changed, she found herself even more grateful for Dalton's acceptance and support. He never made her feel less capable because she was pregnant, only more precious. Winter came early that year, with snow falling in thick, heavy flakes that blanketed the ranch in white. Lucia, now heavily pregnant and moving slowly, spent more time in the house helping Mrs. Chen with the bookkeeping and meal planning. She chafed at the restriction but had to admit that riding out in the bitter cold was no longer practical. In mid-February, on a night when the wind howled around the house and snow piled against the windows, Lucia woke Dalton with a hand on his shoulder and a quiet, "It is time." The birth was long and difficult, made more complicated by the blizzard that prevented them from getting the doctor from town. Mrs. Chen and 2 of the ranch wives who lived nearby acted as midwives, coaching Lucia through the contractions while Dalton paced in the hallway, forbidden from the birthing room by tradition, but refusing to go any farther from his wife. Finally, as dawn broke clear and cold over the snow-covered ranch, a baby's cry rang through the house. Mrs. Chen emerged from the bedroom, her face tired but smiling, and beckoned Dalton inside. Lucia lay propped against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion, but her smile was radiant. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the smallest, most perfect thing Dalton had ever seen. "We have a son." Lucia's voice was hoarse from hours of labor, but it rang with pride and love. "Come meet your son." Dalton crossed to the bed on shaky legs and looked down at the tiny face, the miniature hands curled into fists. He had delivered hundreds of calves and foals over the years, witnessed birth more times than he could count, but nothing had prepared him for the overwhelming wave of love and protectiveness that crashed over him at the sight of his child. "He is perfect." Dalton touched one tiny hand, marveling when the baby's fingers instinctively curled around his. "You are perfect, both of you. We thought we might name him Daniel." Lucia looked up at him, searching his face. "Daniel Garrett, after your father and mine, if that suits you." Dalton's father had died when he was young, and he still carried the man's watch in his pocket every day. The idea of passing that name to his son felt like completing a circle, honoring the past while building the future. It suits me perfectly. He leaned down to kiss Lucia's forehead, then her lips, gentle and reverent. Thank you for him, for this, for everything. We made him together. Lucia smiled tiredly. Equal partners, remember, how could I forget? Dalton settled carefully on the edge of the bed, unable to take his eyes off his wife and son. You are remarkable, Lucia Garrett. Absolutely remarkable. Little Daniel Garrett thrived despite coming into the world during a blizzard. He was a healthy, hungry baby who seemed to have inherited his mother's determination and his father's steady temperament. The ranch hands fell over themselves to help with anything the new family needed, and Mrs. Chen treated Daniel like her own grandchild, which in many ways he was. Lucia recovered quickly from the birth, her strength and resilience serving her well. Within weeks, she was back to light work, though Dalton still worried and fussed over her in ways that made her laugh. She kept Daniel with her as much as possible, strapping him to her body in the style of the Pueblo women she had met in town, letting him sleep while she worked on bookkeeping or garden planning. As spring arrived and the snow melted away to reveal green grass and wildflowers, Lucia stood on the porch of the ranch house with Daniel in her arms and Dalton beside her, looking out at the land they had built together. You ever regret it? Dalton asked quietly, as if the question had been weighing on him. Giving up your father's ranch for this? Lucia turned to look at him, this man who had given her not just work and equal pay but partnership, love, and a family. Not for a single moment. This is exactly where I am meant to be. She meant it with her whole heart. The scared, desperate woman who had ridden through the ranch gates nearly 2 years ago felt like a different person. That Lucia had been looking for survival. This Lucia had found so much more than that. She had found purpose, partnership, and a love that had transformed her life completely. The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching never was, with its unpredictable weather, market fluctuations, and endless hard work. But Lucia and Dalton faced every challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing season. When Daniel was 3, they welcomed a daughter they named Grace, and 2 years after that, another son named Thomas. The ranch house filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the chaos of family life, and Lucia discovered that she loved being a mother almost as much as she loved working the ranch. She and Dalton developed a rhythm that worked for them, splitting responsibilities and supporting each other through the difficult times. When drought struck in 1883 and they lost a quarter of their herd, they rebuilt together. When prices dropped and other ranches folded, they found creative solutions and kept the double bar G profitable. When Daniel showed an interest in horses and Grace wanted to learn roping, they taught their children together, passing on the skills and values that mattered. The other ranchers eventually accepted Lucia's presence not just as Dalton's wife, but as a capable rancher in her own right. When the local Cattlemen's Association formed, Dalton insisted Lucia be included as a full member, and her insights on breeding programs and land management proved invaluable. Catherine Holbrook, the woman who had tried to insult Lucia on that long-ago day in town, married an attorney in Santa Fe and rarely visited Las Lunas. On the occasions when they did cross paths, Catherine's tight smile and envious eyes told Lucia everything she needed to know about who had made the better choice. As the children grew, Lucia made sure to teach them about their grandfather's ranch in Texas, about the land that had been lost and reclaimed and ultimately sold to give them a better future. She told them stories about her father, about his love for the land and his belief that hard work could build something meaningful. And always, Always. She made sure they knew that women were just as capable as men, that determination and skill mattered more than gender, and that equal partnership in marriage and business was something worth fighting for. On their 10th anniversary, Dalton surprised Lucia with a gift. He led her out to the eastern pasture, where a crew had been working for weeks on what he had claimed was a new barn. Instead, Lucia found a beautiful house, smaller than the main ranch house but perfectly formed, sitting on a rise that overlooked the valley. "I thought our children might like the big house someday." Dalton watched her face carefully. "And I thought we might like a place that is just ours, where we can be together without tiny people constantly interrupting." Lucia laughed, tears streaming down her face. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "I am not perfect." Dalton pulled her close. "But I am yours. Always have been, from the moment you demanded the same pay as every other hand on this ranch. And you looked at my work and paid me more." Lucia finished, the memory still bringing warmth to her chest. "Best decision I ever made, riding through your gates." "Second best," Dalton corrected with a smile. "Best decision was saying yes when I asked you to marry me." "Those are both good decisions." Lucia pretended to think about it. "But I think the best decision was choosing to build a life here. To make this home. To love you and let you love me back." They stood together on the porch of their new house, watching the sun set over land they had built into something remarkable through partnership and love and stubborn determination. 3 children played in the distance, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Cattle grazed peacefully across the hills. The ranch they had expanded and improved together spread out in every direction, a testament to what could be accomplished when 2 people worked as equals toward a shared dream. Lucia thought about that frightened woman who had arrived with $12 in desperation, who had demanded fair pay and been given something far more valuable. She thought about Dalton, who had seen past society's expectations to the capable partner she could be. She thought about the life they had built, brick by brick and day by day, founded on mutual respect and deep love. "I am grateful for every moment." Lucia spoke quietly, her head resting on Dalton's shoulder. "Every challenge we have faced, every victory we have won, all of it led us here. And we are not finished yet." Dalton kissed the top of her head. "We have got years ahead of us, more children to raise, more land to work, more life to live together. I am looking forward to every minute of it." Lucia turned in his arms to kiss him properly, with the passion and tenderness that 10 years of marriage had not dimmed. "I love you, Dalton Garrett. Thank you for seeing what I could be." "I love you, Lucia Garrett." He held her close, his heart full. "Thank you for being brave enough to demand what you deserved. Thank you for choosing this life. Thank you for choosing me." They stayed there until the stars came out, talking about their plans for the ranch, for their children, for the future they would build together. And when they finally went back to the main house to tuck their children into bed, they did so as true partners, equal in every way that mattered. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Daniel grew into a thoughtful young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Grace became a skilled horsewoman who could outride most of the hands, and Thomas showed an aptitude for the business side of ranching that made Dalton proud. When Daniel was 17, he asked his father about the early days of the ranch, about how Dalton had built it from nothing. Dalton told him the truth, that he had not built it from nothing at all. He had built it into something truly great only when Lucia joined him, when they became partners. "Your mother is the bravest person I have ever known," Dalton said, looking across the yard to where Lucia was working with a young horse, her movements still sure and confident despite the gray in her hair. "She demanded to be treated fairly, and when I gave her that, she gave me everything in return. Remember that, son. When you find someone to share your life with, make sure it is a real partnership. Make sure you see them for who they truly are and value them accordingly. Daniel watched his mother work, seeing her through new eyes. She changed everything, did she not? Coming here, she changed everything. Dalton agreed. And I thank God every day that she was brave enough to ride through those gates and demand what she deserved. On their 25th anniversary, the Double Bar G was one of the most successful ranches in the territory. They employed 15 permanent hands and brought on extra help during busy seasons. Their cattle were known for quality across several states, and their breeding program was considered one of the best in the region. But more than that, they had built a family and a legacy. Daniel had married a woman from a neighboring ranch, a partnership every bit as equal as his parents. Grace had chosen to pursue veterinary training, revolutionary for a woman but fully supported by her parents. Thomas was learning the business, preparing to take over operations someday while keeping the values his parents had instilled. Lucia and Dalton stood together on the porch of the house he had built for their anniversary years ago, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and peaceful, the result of decades of hard work and partnership. We did all right, did we not? Lucia leaned against Dalton, still fitting perfectly into the curve of his body after all these years. Better than all right. Dalton's arm came around her waist, holding her close. We built something real, something that will last, because we built it together. Lucia turned to look up at him, and despite the lines time had etched around his eyes and the silver threading through his hair, she still saw the man who had looked at her work and paid her fairly, who had seen her value when others would not. Equal partners. Always. Dalton kissed her, slow and sweet, a kiss that held 25 years of partnership and love and mutual respect. I would not have wanted to build any of this with anyone else. As the sun set over the ranch that had become their shared legacy, Lucia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had left Texas with nothing but determination and arrived in New Mexico desperate for work. She had demanded fair pay and received not just that but true partnership, deep love, and a life richer than anything she had imagined. The Double Bar G Ranch was their creation, built on the foundation of two people who believed in treating each other as equals. It would endure long after they were gone, a testament to what could be accomplished when talent was recognized regardless of gender, when partnership was real and not just a word, when love was built on respect as much as passion. Lucia Garrett had demanded the same pay as every hand on the ranch. Dalton Garrett had looked at her work and paid her more. And together, they had built an empire of the heart that would last for generations. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Lucia smiled. This life, this love, this partnership had been worth every risk, every challenge, every moment of fear and doubt. She had found her home not in a place but in a person, in the man who had seen her worth and celebrated it, who had built a life with her as a true equal. And that, Lucia thought as Dalton pulled her closer and their grandchildren's laughter filled the air, was the best kind of happily ever after anyone could ask for.